Good morning. Anyone else a little heavier?
Yeah.
After Thanksgiving? Great. I gained 4 pounds on Thanksgiving.
Great.
Yeah, right. Solid. It's a respectable number. The only time I've done better than that was on a cruise, right? On a cruise, I can manage to gain a few more than that. But I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. I felt like last week went really quickly. But it's going to go really fast from here. If you're looking at our syllabus, we only have, a couple of classes left together and that's it. So talk about that more in a second here. But hopefully everyone is feeling rested. Was it Thursday is December? It's almost December. It's crazy. It feels like it went so fast, but then the first day of school feels like a really long time ago at this point. And I'm sorry if I sound so. I got an awful sinus infection from all the wind and like the dry weather. And it's just giving me a little bit of like a cough and like lingering stuff, but I feel fine other than that. So if I like cough, right. Every time anyone coughs around me, I'm like, it's not COVID. Sinus. But I had another thought, but it left me. Oh, I booked a cruise as part of a Black Friday sale. That was my exciting Thanksgiving thing. We're like, oh, it's so cheap. Let's go. But it's not till next March. But I'm already looking forward to. I'm already planning the food. I've literally this morning was looking at what restaurants can I eat at. Where are all the soft serve machines on the ship? Goes out of Texas to Honduras, Belize, and Mexico. I wish it was tomorrow. I'm ready to go now. Right. So anyway, I could talk about that in football for way too long, but I'll bring it back in. I want to remind you of 2 things. So I put them up on the board. I'm going to start with the second one first. Your final paper is due by this Wednesday night at 11:59 p.m. So originally it was today, but I wanted to have a chance to talk about it just a tiny bit and give you just an extra day or two. I know this is a really stressful time of the semester, stressful time of year. So I hope you're all hanging in there. Try and hang in there. We're almost done. If you're feeling stressed, we're close. We're almost to the end. But the final paper. So if you're on our page and you click on modules, so here are the instructions for the final paper, or you can scroll all the way down underneath everything here to our assignment. So here's part 3 of the paper, and I just want to go over it really quickly. See if there are any questions. If you have any questions, now is a great time to ask. A few of you have already turned it in, which is great. And a couple of people emailed me over break to look at a rough draft, which is great. But this is worth 100 points. So it's worth the same as an exam. So please take it seriously. Spend some time on it. If you haven't finished it, you have a couple of days to keep working on it and get that done. But this should be, if we look at the instructions, this should be 5 to 6 pages long, not including the title page and not including the references page. Okay, so I'm going to write that up here. So 5 to 6 pages plus the title page and references page. Okay, so those 2 pages, one should be on either end. I'll talk more about that here in a second. But I'm looking for like a decent length paper. As a side note, I will never take off if you give me too much, right? So if you go over that, you don't have to like change the margins or the font or anything to make it shorter. You can go over, but you don't want it to be shorter. If it's shorter, I guarantee you didn't go into it in enough depth. So like 5 to 6 pages plus a title page and a references page. And I gave you kind of a format of what people usually cover and what to follow. Typically, people start with like a summary or of the show, a couple of paragraphs. This isn't the focus of the paper, so don't make it like 3 pages long, but give me a couple of paragraphs, describe your movie or your show, a little bit of a description of your character, right? So who are you going to be analyzing? I spent like the whole like last 3 days watching Wednesday. Has anyone else watched that yet? Really cool. Like I want to do her now as like part of the paper, but I'm not writing it. I'm just reading it. But give me like a paragraph describing your person, right? Like if you were to describe your character to another person, and then your main part of your paper is going to be on diagnosing them. So I want you to cover all of the criteria for whatever disorder you think they have or disorders. And then you're going to be giving me examples from the show to support it, right? So you'll say like, here's a criteria, and then describe an example where they show that in the show. Then you're going to give me some causes and treatment, and then any kind of like closing remarks And that should get you to like 5 or 6 pages or so in general. There are a couple of things I'm looking for. I want you to try APA format, but I'm only going to ask a couple of things of you in that formatting. And one of them is to have a title page. So when I open your paper, this should be the first thing that I see, right? Your title page. If you don't have a title page, I'm going to know right off the bat that you didn't even try APA formatting. Okay. And this is worth 10 points of the 100 points for this paper. So I want you to have a title page, and you should also have a references page. Now, if it says works cited or bibliography, again, I'm going to know you didn't even attempt it. So title page and references page. And then you should have on your references page, you should have one academic source. And again, every single one of you could use the DSM if you wanted, or it could be a book or an article. And then you should have your show. Right? And you can have more than that, but at bare minimum, an academic source citation and your show. Okay. And if you are like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with APA, remember that if you go back to modules, a couple of things I'll point out here. There's a writing center handout right here. That's super helpful. They tell you how to do a references page. They give you a sample one, including the DSM. They tell you how to do a title page. There's also the PowerPoint slides that they have for you. So both of these are really helpful resources. If you scroll down a little further, I also have those videos that I asked you to watch earlier in the semester. There's a whole one on APA formatting, which is really, really helpful. The library resources you're probably beyond, but the APA one might be really helpful for you. You can also, if you scroll back all the way up, under the instructions, I gave you some sample papers. So if you're struggling with formatting and you're not quite sure how to format your paper, or you're not quite sure like how other people did this, you can look at these. They're going to give you, I'll just choose this one at random here. Like if you were to click on it, you can see here's a title page. So if you follow this format, you'll be in good shape. And then you can see this person's paper. I scroll through it. And then at the bottom, references, right? And they have their show, and then they have a book, right? So each one of the ones that are on here are all ones that got A's, right? And did a good job, or were like really creative in some way. So these sample papers might be really helpful. The Writing Center handout might be really helpful. So if you're struggling, take a look at those resources. But these are the things that I'm looking for with APA, right? I want you to try the title page, which is actually quite minimal. It's just that front page. And then your references page with these things. And that is all I want you to do for APA. Okay? So not too in depth. I teach research methods in the spring. That's much more in depth with APA, but you don't have to worry about that for this class. And then again, 5 to 6 pages. Make sure you cover all those things. And check out the sample papers. One, they're kind of fun to read. And 2, I think that they might be really helpful for showing how other people organized their paper. If that's something you're struggling with. But are there any questions or anything about this? Anything you're confused about, need more about? Yeah.
There's an outline and it's pretty different system where we use an actual paper.
Okay.
Realize that.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fine. So that's where you were at when you were doing the outline, and now you have a different thought. That's completely fine. And you even could change characters still at this point if you want to. That's a lot of work, but you're welcome to all the way up till when you turn it in. But yeah, that's fine. You don't need to resubmit it or anything. That's good. Anybody else? Other questions about the paper? I'll remind you one more time on Wednesday, but just to make sure it's on your mind. It's due. It's worth a lot of points. So again, you want to make sure you spend some time on it. Okay, so you're turning it in through the link on here, just like last time, so you don't have to print it out or deal with any of that. And then exam number 3 will be next Wednesday, right? So we have today, Wednesday, Monday, and then Wednesday's our exam. That's the last normal day of class. So rather than have the exam during finals week, we're having it on that day. And then I will be here at our final exam time. If you want to come, like, find out anything about your exam or talk about your grade or any of that stuff, I'll be here. But we won't have a mandatory class that day. So I will be here as like an opportunity if any of you want to meet. But the exam will be on Canvas like usual. The study guide's up here. It's not cumulative. So it's just on everything since the last exam. Okay, so start thinking about that, start preparing for it. Don't forget about the paper. Just kind of put all those things on your mind, and I'll play every day, because at this point we only have a few classes left. Was that it?
Forgive my liberalism, again, we will, the final class, although you will be here, it will just be taking it online, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stay.
Perfect.
Right, rather than get in person, I'm gonna stick with the, we've done it all semester.
Thank you.
I think next semester I'm gonna go back to in-person exams. I don't know, any thoughts on that? Do you like them being online? Do you like them online? It's obviously way easier to have your notes in your book, right? It just seemed like it would be less stress. I think people are still, a little bit like getting accustomed to being back like normal. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Oh, yeah. I mean, like it's more stress for people in person than online. Yeah, I would agree. And I feel like it's interesting as a campus, like I teach 4 classes in person right now. In the spring, I'm only teaching 2. Like they're really kind of shifting. People want to be online. Some of the time, right? It's sad to do everything online, and I enjoy seeing them. Yeah.
That's the future though, no?
Probably.
Right?
Right. I mean, I hope not 100%.
Well, I mean, where I'm at is you think that people gathered around the Stone Amphitheater in Greece and listened to Socrates. Exactly the way you're doing now, right?
Did you just give Greek Socrates? Right.
But no, so you mean, that's how far the model goes back.
Yeah, right.
The classroom model is millenniums old.
Mhm.
That's insane to wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
But I believe we're leaving.
Yeah.
Future is what it is,
Mhm.
you
I definitely, I love online too. I've been teaching online for, 15 years now at this point. I love teaching online because I'm so organized, but there is something really nice about seeing you all rather than teaching to like a dark screen. So yeah, I think in the spring it'll be a little more split. But for us, I'm keeping the exam online just because that's what we've done all semester. So I don't want to change that now. That seems like that would be harder. So those are the kind of the plans. What we'll do today, we're going to talk about the movie, and then I'll collect that worksheet from you. So we'll talk about that for a little bit as it relates to chapter 14, kind of highlighting a few things as we go through. And then we'll move on to 15, which is pretty brief. It's disorders of aging. And then after that, we have forensic psych, which will take our last class, or so last class and a half. All right. So if you could pull out your movie worksheet, we're going to spend a little bit of time. Watch the whole film. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's an older movie, but it's such a good example. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Arnie. And then I'll collect it from you. Didn't erase very well, but that's okay. Sure. The sheet. All right. So what I want to do is I want to get a list on the board of some of the things that you put down for number 2. Right. And I'll try and paraphrase them, but we'll get a list going. So anyone want to start us off with something you wrote down for number 2? Hopefully you have tons of bullets. Anyone want to give me one to start? Yeah, thanks.
With repeating certain words.
Okay, so you could say repeating. Let me just try and paraphrase. Okay, what else? What are other things? Yeah. Yeah. So we say for repeating. Okay, other stuff, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No understanding future consequences.
Okay. Consequences. Trying to just kind of shorten it. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe he can't take care of himself, right? Okay, other stuff, yeah,
Deficits in reasoning and judgment.
okay. Okay, yeah,
I put verbal deficits.
okay. So I'm just gonna use that as that. All right, other stuff, what else do you have, anything else on your list? Trying to think if there's anything else that I can think of. What else, anybody, other stuff? Else, anything different? Yeah,
It's kind of rocky.
okay. Let's see, I put that he didn't have, like an emotional filter, that, I mean, that might kind of go up here, but like. Anything else, looking at your list, anything else that you want to add that we think should be up here? Okay, how about so go to number 3. So not supporting it yet, but what are some of the diagnoses that you came up with for him? What are your thoughts? Don't support it, but just give me the disorder. Yeah. Okay. Autistic spectrum disorder. Anyone have something different? Yeah. OCD. Okay. Other stuff, yeah. Separation anxiety. Anything else? There's at least one other big one that should be, I feel like should be up here. Yeah. Yeah, we can just do IDD for short. Anything else that we want to add as things to talk about with him? Okay, so these are the different disorders. And there's, in my opinion, one that fits him best from up here. But let's start with autistic spectrum disorder. I'm just going to put this up as we talk about it. How many of you thought that maybe autistic spectrum disorder fits Arnie? Just by show of hands. Okay, a lot of you. So why? What were some of the reasons that you thought ASD, autistic spectrum disorder? A lot of you said that fits him. Yeah. Okay. So the social interactions for you were like a factor. Okay. What else? What are some of the other reasons? Yeah.
Well, in the international development disorder was, I know that like stims a lot, like he said repeated words.
Mhm.
He doesn't repeat words.
Yeah. He has a lot of repeating, right? Like not only with his movements, but also with counting. He does a lot of those kind of things. You had your hand up as well. Yeah. 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 Right. So big things and little things, right? Repeating the water tower, the counting, the movements. Some of those things are definitely characteristic of ASD. Anything else to support autism? Why you might have thought that he fell here? I don't think that this fits perfectly, right? But I do think that he has some elements of it, right? He is pretty responsive. Right now, so autism exists on a spectrum, which is why we call it autistic spectrum disorder, right? It goes from very mild to severe or profound. And so he could be on like the milder end, but he's very responsive to people. It isn't always appropriately responsive, but he is very responsive. And something that is very atypical of someone with ASD, he has no problem with physical contact. It's very like expressive, right? He hugs Becky, he hugs Gilbert, right? He has a lot of like physical interaction that doesn't
Respectfully, of course, I would, you're describing as very responsive, and this is a character in a movie who isn't treated to come down off a high ladder as a listen. isn't treated the way it does the person. So respectfully, I would not, let me say this, there's a level of engagement,
Sure.
but I would not call him responsive. As a matter of fact, I would say a lot of the plot is driven by the fact he's completely ignoring what other people tell him. Complete ignorance.
Or
He's
doing.
saying, Arnie, like,
Yeah.
Arnie, whatever, Arnie get in the water, Arnie do this, Arnie do that. Arnie no doing that. Okay, so respectfully, I don't know if I would describe it. I would find him pretty markedly non-responsive.
So responsive doesn't necessarily mean I do what you ask me to.
Okay.
Right, so like responsive just means you are responding to cues, right? So when Gilbert sings to him when he's up the water tower, he starts repeating it and singing it, he hears him, right? When Becky comes, it's Becky and he squeals and he's excited to see her. So responding to things doesn't mean responding appropriately or doing what people ask you to do. And I think we'll get to that maybe a little bit more here. But no, I'm glad you're thinking about it critically, though. He definitely doesn't do what he's told, right? But he's aware of other people around him, even if his filter isn't quite there or he doesn't have a good consequence understanding. He still has like some degree of response.
So I understand this when you say, for example, he may not be bathing, but you can just simply tell non-verbally in his eyes, he knows he's in the bathroom. He knows that there's his brother in the bathroom. And that is what you're saying, that meets your level of definition of that. He's responding and then he may not be obedient.
Sure.
But you're saying that he's got some assimilation of the social cues he's getting.
To some degree, right? So
Correctly?
yeah, so Gilbert looks at him and says, right, like, you're a big boy, you can wash yourself. And he's like, I'm gonna be a big boy, I'm gonna wash myself, right? Like, he responds to him in a way that's very uncharacteristic of somebody who's 17, but he's still responding, right? So typically when we say lack of responsiveness, it's somebody who is, you could talk to them and they have like blank. It's almost like they don't hear you or they're in their mindset or somewhere else, so dissociated with you. He definitely has some of this repetitive stuff, right? With the counting and the water tower, like you mentioned, and the motor movements. Again, autism's on a spectrum, and I think there are elements of it that fit him, but there are elements of some other things as well. I want to make one side note here, and I don't have it on the slide, but how many of you have heard of Asperger's before? Right? A lot of you. Okay, so Asperger's used to be its own distinct disorder, and it is no longer, right? And this is covered in the book, but just in case, I ask you this, I want to make a point that Asperger's is now part of ASD, part of the autistic spectrum disorder, right? So it used to be its own separate thing. It's been absorbed into this. Typically, that's somebody who's very smart, very intelligent, but they have very bad social cues, right? They have very poor understanding of like the world around them socially, but they're often quite intelligent. So just as a side note, Asperger's is now part of this disorder, right? In case I were to ask you that, I want to make sure I mentioned it. Yeah.
The fact that right now autism has such like a broad variation of like manifestation and etiology, like, that's one of the reasons why I was really hesitant to diagnose him with it. Where right now I'm like kind of split between assigning certain aspects of like IDD and autism, and also like he mentions the fact that it's an older movie and he's a character. I was about to say character word, but it's a little bit accurate. But he was probably modeled off of very extreme, like case studies
Sure.
and whatnot, and movie writers. I mean, this is probably one of the better written characters who's with a developmental disability that I've seen, but at the same time it's still like a mixed bag of cherry picked elements.
And I would completely agree with you, which is why I think he makes for good discussion, because I don't think he fits any one thing perfectly.
Yeah.
Like I think if you made a case for this or this, you're on the right track, right? And they kind of blend them, right? But I do think, like you said, it's probably one of the better portrayals of somebody with a developmental disorder. Which disorder? I'm not sure, right? But with a disorder, I would say. So I'm glad you mentioned it. So this, I see some elements, but let's talk about, I'm gonna skip the middle two, because I think those are like, they're valid, but they're not the whole picture. So let's talk about IDD and Arnie for a minute. Did anyone think that this fits Arnie by show of hands? Right, a few of you? I would say, I would say either of these. But I do, in all fairness, I would lean here. Like if I had to make a diagnosis of Arnie, my money would go here. And the biggest reason why, he doesn't act his age. Okay, so typically, and you would see this in autistic spectrum disorder as well, but somebody who has IDD typically isn't performing or functioning at their age level. Now he's 17, about to turn 18 for his birthday party for most of the movie. He acts very comfortably, I would say, like a 5-year-old, right? Like my youngest are 8, and they are more capable than I would say Arnie is at 17, 18. So when he says, some of the things that he says and does remind me of when my kids were 4 or 5. Very much so, like that poor awareness of like he killed the grasshopper and then cries, like I killed him. He didn't put those two things together. Typically, that's something kids don't understand until about 7, the idea of life and death. The fact that he couldn't get out of the bathtub, like my kids can bathe themselves fine at 8, like by themselves without any help. And they could at 6. A little bit of help before that, but the things that he needs to be like taken care of, he can't take care of himself. He's dependent on others. The poor understanding of consequences. Some of these things to me would point me here that like he, with a little bit of help, right, he could maybe like be a little better, right? We'll get there hopefully in a minute. But I think if you put either of these, then you're in the right spot. They blend them a little bit, like kind of like you were talking about. But for me, the biggest thing here is that he doesn't act his age. He's not acting in a way that is typical of someone who's 17 or 18 years old. He needs to be cared for much more so than he should for his age. Definitely see some of these elements. You see some ADHD elements as well, right? With his inattentionness and like hyperactivity. But I think these are the two big ones. And they're the two big disorders in this chapter as well. Along with a lot of other smaller ones that I hope you looked over as you were thinking about Arnie. What about some of the contributing factors? What are some things that you think aren't helping his situation or maybe contributing to his situation? Is that a hand? Yeah, and then I'll go back.
Same age level.
Sure.
Is that always with needs?
Mhm.
So it doesn't challenge the same, you know, like also cognitively, but also like socially.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's not helping, right?
Yeah.
Right, for sure. I like it. Yeah, you had a thought too. Mhm.
And I feel like is that I feel like he could have been more like independent if his family had
Yeah.
him. It makes it seem like the mom especially like blames the brother for when he can't do stuff, and the rest of them are it's kind of their job to take care of him.
Yeah. I think the family dynamic doesn't do him any favors at all in a lot of ways, right? And emotionally, in terms of caring for himself, right? I think that's a really big factor. Yeah.
No, I don't want to like in the movie they do get angry at him for like the stuff he does, even though they kind of, as she said, like they
Yeah.
just
Right. Kind of a little bit of a clash between the two, right? He really should be in a lot of trouble for destroying that cake, in my opinion, right? That's not okay, right? Yeah. What did you come up with? Yeah.
Right, it doesn't just affect him, but also like several other members.
Yeah. And I'm glad you picked up on that. They are a little like covert about it, but his father committed suicide. He hung himself in the basement, right? He says hung out to dry, and the dad's ghost is in there. And so he hung himself in the basement. Clearly there's some like emotional stuff in the family. We could speculate that maybe he had like some kind of childhood injury or something happened like prenatally with him. We don't know, but we could kind of speculate. I think the family and the environment and like the dad's death and like all of those things, they're definitely playing a role. They're definitely contributing, to some of the things going on with him. Yeah.
It's all, the old joke about, is there, there's so many things. That's sort of the way the plot of the movie hammers things.
Sure.
There's really almost no positive. You know what I mean? There's suicide of the father, there's mother, social functions, boom, 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 boom. They're in a small town with no medical care whatsoever. So the, you know, the answer, it would be, is there anything at all that helps them? No, that's, no, let them all out, you know.
Okay.
That's my.
Yeah, I would say the only resilient factor that he has is his family does literally love and care for him. But he is in a small town. We could add that to the list of contributors. There's not a lot of resources or things there to help him. Yeah, he has a lot going against him, right? For sure. He definitely does. How about number 5? What are some things we could maybe do to help him out? I think that with some help, he could really like have a different quality of life. In my opinion, anyway. Yeah. Okay. Medication, maybe. Okay. That might help with some of the like the hyperactive stuff and things like that. Okay. Was there, yeah.
I was saying that his family and him could be entered into psychoeducation sessions.
Sure.
To help them support him better. You know, he could get specialized academic aid in real therapy. Honestly, for me, I feel like medication should kind of be a last resort for
Yeah.
somebody like Barney, because
Sure.
during psychiatric trials, it's really important for the patient to be able to communicate what sort of experience they're having with their medication and they're having any sort of side effects. And with Arnie, I would worry that at this, in the state he's in the movie, that he would really struggle to accurately communicate and would have some
Yeah.
really gnarly side effects.
Yeah, I would hold off on, like, I think medication could potentially be helpful for some of the smaller stuff, but I think, you know, the bigger things it wouldn't help with, right? And so I would say that wouldn't be the first thought either. And you mentioned schooling. It's clearly summer, right? But there's no school, there's no structure, there's nothing for him, right? So maybe like some, like a better school or like some psychoeducation for the family would go a long way. I think those things would be really helpful. Yeah.
Special education would be really helpful.
Sure.
Like just for structure.
Yeah.
Like if we wake up at this time,
Mhm.
do this, that.
Right.
Because I feel like there's no structure throughout the entire movie for him.
Yeah.
Like he was saying earlier, the inconsistencies of like babying him and then sometimes getting mad at him. I feel like that could be doing more than good as well.
Yeah, and I think some structure for him and more consistency would go a long way, right? And so not to again compare him to my little ones, right? But since they started kindergarten at 5, we have they have a morning checkoff sheet on the wall, right? So when they wake up, they have to make their bed, to try to make their bed. I end up making it, but like they have to try. They have to get dressed, you know, and so they check each one off and they follow a structure. I think something like that for Arnie would go a long way of just like, these are the things you need to do. And then maybe here are the consequences, right? If you don't do them, let's have some consistency. I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Like his feelings, so the therapist would show them do that. And
Yeah. I think that could be really helpful. Right? Yeah.
Well, I see why the question was asked for all these. Actually, part of the taking this class is enjoying hearing these intelligent feedback from fellow students. But as the question is written, what are some possible interventions treatments for Arnie? In the framework of that movie, there aren't any. And that's what I wrote. Because there's no real help for the quote unquote mentally healthier people in this room. So my answer was no, due to the poor quality of mental health care in a small town.
Sure.
So, I mean, the answer, I know what you wanted us to think about, should we be medication, could we be behavior modification? But in the framework of that reality, what is available, I think the answer is just nothing.
Sure.
And when I wrote one.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
And
if Barney was in a desert island and you say, what's available? Well, the text would say this, and this.
sure.
He's almost literally in a desert island. As I said, the normal people need help and there's no help there.
We could easily come up with like structure within his family and like some like structure and some consistency, but there aren't a lot of resources and it's a very small town.
I would take.
I would not
I
want
would
to-
I would say that zero. I would not even say not a lot. I would say zero.
Sure.
That was my 2 cents.
All right, yeah.
I would say even like being around someone that understood what his disorder, like
Yeah.
in a way, his band and the intellectual development disorder is, and so they don't have the resources that
Yeah, right. And so that could be education or it could be like another individual. They clearly move at the end of the movie. So hopefully they're going somewhere, a bigger town where you could get resources, or maybe it would be that you go to school in another town or goes to a therapist in another town. Like it's clearly within that town, there's not a lot there. Ice cream therapy. I mean, they have an ice cream shop, so it's not the worst place to live, right?
And burger bar.
And a burger barn, like I could make that work right between those two. But yeah, I mean, I think trying to get him some more resources, I do think he could have a lot of success with caring for himself if he were to be taught some like concrete skills, right? Those are things that you often do with young children. And I think they would work well for Arnie, along with definitely like some family stuff, right? The family dynamic needs some help. And it's obviously quite different at the end after the mom passes. But I think that approaching all of those things could help him in some way. Right. And again, we didn't dive into like some of the stuff in here. So hopefully you looked at it when you were kind of deciding with Arnie. But most people have, typically happy like childhoods, but there can be some special unique pressures that happen during childhood, unique disorders to childhood, which was the focus of this chapter. And I think, again, the movie does a good job of kind of portraying a struggle, though it's not 100% one. So as long as you made a case for whatever you thought, you're in good shape. Any other comments at all about the movie or about Arnie or anything? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that every time they knew that Arnie would just go back and try to find body power.
Yeah.
But there was never anything in place to defend him. So
Sure.
physically or behaviorally. So
Yeah.
they just kind of said, hey, don't do that.
Right.
They kind of knew he was gonna do it. Yeah, that was kind of something I saw was like maybe, understanding, his condition a little bit more.
Yeah.
And understanding like what he can do, what he won't do, and maybe what he can do.
And some consequences, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he gets arrested, but that doesn't seem, he's excited about it, right? Yeah. Right.
Just like you need to understand his pattern.
Hmm.
And create a method of dealing with it so that we can not act on that in a socially acceptable way.
Completely agree. And a lot of that is, again, that family dynamic, right? Needing more like structure, more consistency, more, all those things would help. I think sad to watch Gilbert lose his temper, right? And smack him, right? It's very challenging if you have known or worked with or lived with somebody with a developmental disorder. It can be very hard, right? And Gilbert has a lot of patience for him, but he does lose it at one point. And I think it's important that they show that, as hard as it is to see, like this can be, these things can be challenging to deal with, like any disorder can be, right? And so I think getting some support would go a long way for their family. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good depiction of caretaker burnout.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the character of Gilbert, how like imperfect he was.
Yeah.
Because the whole trope of my brother's keepers, like
Yeah.
they're so noble and like jumped up. But with him, it just seems like he was so like fucking done with it. He's like, I want to get out of here so bad.
Yeah. For all that to fall on his shoulders, that's a lot, right? I mean, and he's young too, right? And like trying to do things in his life, and that's a lot to put on him. And I like that he's not perfect. I agree. Like, I like that they had him, have flaws, because that's typical. Most people do burn out, when you're caring for somebody, whether they're older or younger, it's taxing, right? So I thought that was important that they showed that, even if it's not the easiest to see, right? Everyone was like gasping, right? It's sad to see, but it definitely does happen. Yeah.
Kind of interested, because like throughout the movie, you see like, his brother on his phone.
Gilbert.
Yeah, Gilbert.
Mhm.
Kind of directed in that way, the water time, not doing this, not doing that, not doing that. I'm surprised that the directors, here's a movie do represent Arnie with and like violently towards Gilbert.
Yeah.
That's a really, really big common.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to call it a symptom, but like behavior.
Yeah, like presentation, you could say, right? Like, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like when a child or a person will do something, they often fight, scratch, slap, hiss, and
Mhm.
during that aggressive scene, I'm really surprised that
Yeah.
even though personally, no one understanding what is going on, they still have those mistakes.
Yeah. And very unfiltered emotions, right? Because of the stuff going on, right? And you're absolutely right. That's something that you see a lot of, like the outbursts coming back, and you see him kind of like playfully slap him at the end. But yeah, it wouldn't be atypical at all to see him be violent toward Gilbert or violent toward his sister or his family, or at least just have an emotional outburst toward them. He does a lot of like squealing and things like that, which is well portrayed. But yeah, that I do as well think that they could have added a little bit more of that. That is something that you do typically see with these disorders. All right, if you want to pass those forward to me, make sure your name is on them. All right. So now where we'll go, we'll talk about aging. This is a pretty brief chapter. There are only a couple of disorders in here that we're kind of focused on. But I went with the fall colors. My grandma used to say, and she's been gone for years, but she used to say she was well seasoned at the end of her life, right? Like that she got very well seasoned. She lived to 102, so extremely well seasoned at that point. But kind of that metaphor like of the fall and like the leaves changing and so on. So we'll talk a little bit about aging and cognition. Disorders of cognition are the big one in here that we'll get into a little bit. And this whole realm, when we're talking about disorders of aging, we're in the realm of geropsychology, right? So studying people who are elderly. And in our culture, in our society, old age in our society is typically defined as past 65, right? So 65 and beyond is what we typically define as elderly, or like older geropsychology. And you can specialize in this whole area specifically if it interests you. And just like childhood, old age brings special pressures and unique upsets, different biological changes. There are things that happen as we get older, right? Sadly, starting in our mid-20s, we start to decline at a very, very slow rate. And we can do a lot of things to keep that progression or that decline from happening quickly. But there are a lot of things that change as we get older. And one of them is cognition, which we'll talk about. So there are kind of two main groups of disorders. There's disorders that are common among all ages, right? That can happen in people who are older. And those are the ones we've been talking about all semester, right? People who are older can have any of the disorders that we've covered so far. And then there are disorders that are more unique to aging, which results in like changes of cognition, things like the neurocognitive disorders, which we'll get to in a few minutes. That's kind of the main focus of this chapter, is the disorders that can affect cognition, things like Alzheimer's and the different dementias and so on. So in the first cluster, again, these are things we talked about all semester, right? People who are older can have depression, they can have anxiety, they can have substance abuse, psychotic disorders, and personality disorders. Any of the things that we've talked about all semester can also occur in the elderly population. Substance abuse is a very common thing happening in the older group, in the elderly population. And it tends to revolve around one group of medications, and that's prescription drugs. Very likely that people who are older, if they're going to abuse drugs, it's typically prescription medications. My mother-in-law, I always pick on my mother-in-law, my poor mother-in-law. I really do love her, but I pick on her. She's so easy to pick on. She was over for Thanksgiving and she had a headache. And she's like, oh, I'll just take 4 of these. She had like this cocktail of like 2 Motrins and 2 Tylenols and then 1 other pill. It's like 5 pills. And I was like, why don't you just take like just 2 Tylenol? She's like, oh, no, I have this great little cocktail that I use when I have a headache. And I was like, okay. And she's like drinking that or taking that with alcohol. And I'm like, there's so many issues with what you're doing right now. But she knows better, right? Like, oh, if the doctor prescribed me 1, 2 will work better, right? And that's something that you see a lot in like across ages, but specifically in the elderly population, you see a lot of like mistaking medication or forgetting that you took it, so you take it again, or going to doctor to get prescribed medication, whether it's for pain or for something else. You see more abuse of substances that are prescribed in this population than any other age population. Yeah.
Dates of the study that the state, you're basing this on, darn recent,
Oh, I mean, this is just common, like,
absolutely common.
yeah, oh, yeah, for sure. And it's very common.
Forgive me, not marijuana.
Oh,
Marijuana, which is now legalized.
Mhm.
Marijuana, where people my age, when I was these folks' age, were little pot smoking stoners. It is not. I'm surprised to hear this. It's not marijuana. It's going to the doctor and shaking the doctor down.
It's the number one. Yeah, I mean.
Yes, I'm just surprised.
So if somebody abused alcohol their whole life,
Right.
then they would likely continue abusing it into their elderly years. If they abused marijuana their whole life, or like recently, they would probably continue with that. And this can be accidental or purposeful. And a very common thing is people get older and their memory declines. People start using things like that, the little like boxes that have your pills in them, because people forget if they took their medication or not. Like my mom does this all the time. Be like, did I take my pills? And I'm like, check your box, right? If they're in there, you didn't take them. If they're gone, hopefully that means you took them or you dropped them on the floor somewhere. I don't know, one or the other. But you know, it's very common that people forget, or they go to doctor trying to seek medication, or because they're older, maybe thinking they know better. I mean, that can happen when you're younger too. But it's most common that it's prescription medications. But if you abused marijuana earlier in life, probably would continue to use it and abuse it when you're older, right? Potentially. Yeah.
Is there like, I know this might sound weird, is there like a medication that someone can take that's not elderly that can help with their memory?
There isn't anything that's like 100% like, yeah,
Their medication.
sure. And that's common, right? Like that happened, like normal little mishaps in memory like that happen to all of us. Like if you're sleep deprived, it's going to be worse. If you're distracted, it's going to be worse, right? When I went to Disneyland, I couldn't find my car after the day was over because I was so like, I'm having a churro. I didn't even look where I parked in Mickey and Friends, right? Thank goodness my partner did and my kids did. They're like, no, we're in R2D2. Like, you know, like they knew where we were. I didn't have a clue, right? Because I was distracted. So those kind of things are normal. There isn't anything that will magically improve memory, but things like getting good sleep, there's a lot of like herbs and vitamins that are thought to boost mental functioning. But sadly, there isn't like a magical memory pill. I wish there was. That'd be amazing for most of us, but not yet anyway. Yeah.
There's a lot of like nootropic gum and stuff.
Yeah.
Like Joe Rogan podcast is talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Right. There's all these kind of interesting, like they're a little bit pseudoscientific in that like some of it is like placebo and some of it is, you know, the expectation that it will work. But yeah, there's a lot of like ideas and things that are being looked at, but nothing like sadly magical that will reverse this. Yeah, yeah. And hopefully there will be one day. I mean, that would be amazing, right? So more than the disorders that affect us at any age, these are the ones we're more interested in for our purposes, disorders of cognition, right? So as we age, and I just said this, right? As we age, we're going to have mishaps in memories, right? And that happens at any age. Like I walked up here this morning and I forgot what I came up here for and I had to go back down to my office. Second I walked in my office, I remembered and I came back up. Like those little moments happen if you're distracted, sleep deprived, stressed out, they happen more. But as we age, it's common to see more and more of that, right? I can't remember where I put my keys. I can't remember this person's name. I don't remember what happened at this event, right? It becomes common, but people can go beyond common and have what are called neurocognitive disorders, which used to be called dementia, but they've renamed it. Or they can have something called a delirium. These are slightly different things. So delirium, and then there's dementia. And the dementia are now called neurocognitive disorder because they affect somebody's cognitive functioning. So delirium is something that happens very quickly, has a very rapid onset. This is typically something due to like an infection, a stroke, a high temperature, right? Something like medically driven. It's a very, very fast onset, and it's typically easy to correct if you can identify the cause. So maybe somebody has surgery, and as a result of the surgery, they have an infection or they have a fever. That can cause somebody to be delirious, right? To have a delirium, delirious, they're connected. What typically happens when someone is in a delirious or delirium state, they're not aware of where they are. They might hallucinate. It tends to be something that happens very quickly with a specific, typically medical onset. And if you can identify that, if somebody has an infection, you treat the infection, it will go away, right? You bring down the fever, goes away, right? When people have a high fever, they typically hallucinate. It's very, very common. So this is something that is like short-lived, rapidly onsetting, and usually able to be corrected or fixed or treated if you can identify it, versus the dementias or the neurocognitive disorders have a very slow onset. These typically develop over the course of many years, and they slowly get worse and worse and worse over time. Right? Think of Alzheimer's, which we'll talk about in a minute. It tends to start with small things and then it escalates, right? But it takes years and years for somebody to hit the point of having like full-blown Alzheimer's. And these are very difficult, if not impossible, to treat or cure. Right? Most of the neurocognitive disorders do not have a cure, right? Unfortunately, many of them are fatal, and they take years and years to like build up and have a very slow onset. So just a little bit of a difference between these two. Again, think if you're delirious, you don't know what's going on, right? You're not aware of your surroundings. Typically a very fast correctable thing, versus the dementias or the neurocognitive disorders that we'll talk about next are very slow. And there are treatments, but all they do is slow it down. They don't stop it or reverse it. As of now, lots of research being done on this, but nothing quite yet. Yeah.
Percentage of the aging population that would potentially have delirium, rarer or more common, please?
But so that's, I missed the first part.
Percentage of the aging population that might potentially have delirium, rarer or more common, please?
I don't, I'm not sure if it's, because you can have it at any age, right? So delirium, again, is typically medically related. So like, for example, my mom had surgery last year and she got an infection as part of the surgery and caused a delirium. It was gone 3 days later. But she was calling me my like aunt. She didn't know who anyone was. So that's something that can be common among any age, versus these are almost exclusively older
And
populations.
what percentage, and that's my segue. Second one, which I would think is far more common. Having said that, what percentage hypothetically of the aging population, shall we say, what percentage of the aging population of 65 we show beyond, shall we say, normal intellectual deterioration aging? What percentage would have the neurocognitive disorder?
So it's 1 in 10 over the age of 65.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the older you get, the more likely it becomes, unfortunately. But over the age of 65, it's 1 in 10 specifically to Alzheimer's. So it might be a little bit more if you add all of them together. But it's about 10%, and that only goes up the older you get, right? So people who live into their 90s or hundreds, it's almost, I don't want to say inevitable, but it's super common when people get into their 90s. It happens with
That's my follow-up. So, okay, what percentage of the aging population over 90 would have that?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. You could look it up.
I'm gonna tell my phone.
Yeah, I don't know what the percentage would be. I know like Ken is 1 in 10 after 65, but it only exponentially increases.
I know what, it's all there online.
Sure.
I'll follow.
Was that a hand? I thought it was, oh, there was a there.
We saw a lot of COVID, being on COVID, they had.
Yeah,
Brain fog.
yeah.
Would it be the same as delirium, like it's being more, severe, is it just kind of a misnomer?
Yeah, delirium is typically much shorter lived, right? Like, and so, but yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one. The brain, like the long hauler syndrome and the brain fog that's come from COVID, the long-term stuff in the lungs, the heart, like, there's a lot of really frightening long-term effects of COVID. And obviously we don't know fully how long they last because it hasn't been around that long. But yeah, I mean, that's typically addressed separately, right? And we'll have to see. Yeah, so that'd be separate than delirium. That's thought to be very specific to COVID. And we'll see, you know, how long that lasts. We don't know, right? Is the frightening thing. I mean, that could be permanent or it could fade. There are some scary things like that. For sure. So the most common of the neurocognitive disorders by far is Alzheimer's, right? Alzheimer's disease is the most common. This was named after Alois Alzheimer, who identified the first case back in 1906. But this is by far the most common of the dementias or neurocognitive disorders. Usually until it's treated. Right, so it's typically a very short-lived thing because it's typically brought on by an infection or a stroke or something like to that nature. So if you treat it, it's usually a matter of days versus this is years. So we're looking at like days versus years. So Alzheimer's is something that usually happens after the age of 65. Like I said, 1 in 10 over the age of 65. Typically lasts 8 to 10 years, and it unfortunately is something that is fatal. Right. How many of you have known someone with Alzheimer's, know or have known? Right. A lot of you, this is a very cruel disease, right? It's cruel for the family, it's cruel for the person who has it. It starts out with smaller things and then it progresses to bigger memory loss, personality changes over time. And it's a very biologically driven disease. It's caused by a buildup of two things: neurofibrillary tangles and senile plaques. And these are things that everybody has, but people who have Alzheimer's have more of them. So as we age, these little twisted fibers tend to accumulate in the brain, and they interfere with neuron communication, right? And so people start to have memory loss, they start to have personality changes, it kind of progresses backward. And so these plaques and these protein buildups, these beta amyloid proteins and these neurofibrillary tangles interfere with normal brain functioning, causing people to have the symptoms of dementia, of Alzheimer's. And again, this tends to be a disorder that progresses, right? So it starts with small things, and then it gets worse and worse over time. Ultimately, people, you know, they forget to do simple basic functions. Their body forgets how to fight off an infection, how to walk, how to breathe in the final stages. So oftentimes a cold or something small will take somebody out who's had this for years. I have a little video that goes through the progression of it, kind of talks about it a little more. So I'll play that for you. It's only a couple of minutes, but I think it's a helpful description. Play that for you. Brain that is like a memory index. And so what you often see is people who have Alzheimer's struggle with little things, right? Like, can't remember the word, like it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it. Or I don't remember, you know, this person that I just met, or I can't remember what I'm supposed to do today, or did I just do this or not? Starts with those like very short-term memory things, and then it progresses backward, right? And so what you often see is somebody will start with that, and then they don't remember like the last year or two, and then a few years back, and then even farther and farther. And those long-term memories are one of the last things affected, but they do tend to, it gets to that point at some point. Yeah.
Shouldn't drive.
Shouldn't drive. So in the beginning it's okay, but toward the end, no, probably not, right? You know, and they might have great difficulty you know, even understanding or knowing the rules of the road, but they might forget that is one of the challenging things. But yeah, toward the end you definitely shouldn't be driving. Your cognitive capacities are very low, or they occur in pockets. You know, if a lot of you said you know someone or knew someone. The tricky thing with this disease is it comes and goes at times, the memory anyway. I mean, the disease is always there, but what happens is people might one day or 1 minute have full lucidity and remembrance and awareness of everything, and then the next minute it's gone, right? And so that can be the really hard thing with this, is people have those moments of lucidity and then they disappear again. And that's very common with this disorder because of the way the brain is organized and memory works. Right, we get these pockets of memory that pop up, and then they might be gone again. And as a side note, I looked it up. Over the age of 85, 50% of people develop this, and it doubles every 5 years after the age of 65. So-
If you live in your nineties,
Yeah,
you'd be probably only like literally 1 in 10 wouldn't have.
yeah, your likelihood in your 90s is quite high. So over the age of 85, it's 50%.
Doubles incrementally, you said.
Every 5 years.
So,
Yeah, so and again, the older you get,
there's fun ahead for.
but I mean, a lot of people don't live into their 90s, you know, and so, and some people do live into their 90s and they're fine, right? My partner's grandma just passed like a few weeks ago, 99, never developed this. So smart, like so bright, so sharp, really witty all the way to the end. Never developed a shred of dementia, nothing at all. You would never know she was 99. Like she acted much, much younger, and mentally, cognitively was very with it. A lot of it has to do with how you care for but the older you get, sadly, the more vulnerable you are. Yeah.
Obviously, this is something of interest to me. I have heard died of Alzheimer's, and as I'm understanding this, essentially the very last thing is it starts the part of the brain that controls automatic function.
Yeah.
Specifically breathing.
Yeah.
So when it gets to that,
You just
you ain't
stop.
breathing no more, and bye-bye, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my
I
dad,
wondered why I thought, well,
yeah,
there's people who are extremely, there's really nothing there but the shell,
yeah,
but the heart and the brain are still working.
right.
But so now I know why they died of Alzheimer's thing.
Yeah. So my dad passed of Alzheimer's 4 years ago. He actually had Lewy body dementia, which is on the next slide. It's similar. And it lasted 16 years for him. But at the end, yeah, I mean, the breathing, it's your brain just forgets to regulate automatic functions like breathing and heart rate. Yeah, and ultimately that's what will claim your life. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. So there's actually its own type, right? So vascular neurocognitive disorder is the result of strokes or blood clots or some kind of physical anomaly that can happen, right? So there's a lot of different types of dementia, neurocognitive disorders, as they're called. Alzheimer's is by far the most common, but people oftentimes will get vascular neurocognitive disorder, which can be the result of like a blood clot or a stroke or something along those lines. And then I mentioned my dad had Lewy body dementia, named after the person who like developed or noticed and like coined the term of these little protein deposits called Lewy bodies. Very similar to Alzheimer's, but it affects your movement a little bit more. And so people who have that start to shuffle and lose the ability to walk toward the end of their life. But it's very, very similar to Alzheimer's in like the presentation and the timing, a little bit longer. It can last a little longer, and people tend to have more hallucinations and so on with that. There's a bunch of them. And so I kind of gave you a list of some of the other ones. The one main one that we're kind of focused on is Alzheimer's, but people can have Creutzfeldt-Jakob-Pick's disease. Creutzfeldt-Jakob, which is fun to say, right, is caused by a slow-acting virus. It's the human equivalent of mad cow disease, right? Very, very, very rare, typically in like underdeveloped places with like way less regulation on food, can come from bad meat, right? Very rare though. And then Huntington's and Parkinson's are other things that we sometimes see a little bit more. With Parkinson's, we see a lot more like tremors and rigidity, but it does fall under this category of a neurocognitive disorder. And then Huntington's, movement related issues as well. Yeah.
So I know Huntington's, it's a bit of genetic.
Yeah. Right.
Getting it, how similar is that to any of these other?
Sure. So Alzheimer's is actually not a genetic disease, right? So unless it occurs early. So after the age of 65, it's thought to just be a disease of aging. If people get it early, if you get early onset dementia, that does tend to run in families. So somebody like 55, 60, the earliest case was in someone who was 21, I want to say. Super rare. There was clearly something else going on there. And I don't know any more details on that, but I remember it was very young. Sometimes people will get these in their like 50s or early 60s. And if that's the case, those tend to be more genetic. After 65, it's not considered a genetic vulnerability. So it can run in families or not. It really is more about aging than anything. Yeah. Except like you were saying, these ones tend to be way more genetic than the others.
So if, let's say you mentioned it when you're only your brother had died or your father died of Alzheimer's, are
Mhm.
you more likely to get dementia, or sorry, Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
or another form of dementia? Like, how does that work?
Sure.
If you've got the genetic component, does it just relate to that specific
Mhm.
form of it, or does it relate to everything?
So it's typically that form, right? So if, let's say, if my dad didn't get it until he was like in his late 60s. But I guess it was more like his early 60s, if I think about it. But that one, like Lewy body dementia, tends to run in families, but only for men. So I guess I dodged a bullet on that one, but my brother did not. It can run in families. It typically is the specific disorder. Like Huntington's is like 50% genetic. I mean, like if you have a biological parent who has it, you're like 50% likely to have it. Lewy body dementia is way lower. It's like in the low ones. It's like 2, 3, 4% somewhere in there. Alzheimer's, again, only if it's early does it tend to run in the family. But it tends to be specific to the specific type that they had, if that makes sense. Was there another? Yeah, it was. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, which is why it falls here, right? So Parkinson's and Huntington's have a lot of like the physical stuff. So very common with Parkinson's, you see people like shaking, right? There's a lot of tremors and shaking and unsteadiness, but they also have cognitive decline at a much higher rate, which is why it falls under the neurocognitive disorders. But they have a lot more of that like physical like stuff going on, but that's a common element, which is why it would fall. And again, we have medications that people can take to slow these things down, but nothing to stop them. This is a huge area of research because it's so popular in terms of like commonality. And so this is something that's being studied very, very like aggressively. Yeah.
And there would be, that's stupid that no one would get this place in the class, but of course, like, interesting chapter for me. There are studies out there that I can find that would have what you would call absolutely normal intellectual deterioration.
Mhm.
I mean, there are people where you don't need to jump to a diagnosis, just say, Uncle Eddie's 84, and there's nothing abnormal about the person.
Right.
There's simply regular deterioration. It's also noted, am I correct that I could find, shall I say, they have 5-year age brackets? Would I be correct on that?
Yeah, right. And like as we age, right? Like my parents, my partner's parents, like they tell me the same stories over and over again, right? Grandparents telling you that same, some of you are laughing, the same story. I'm like, Grandpa, dude, you just told me that 5 minutes ago, right? Like the same stories, the same things that's so common, as we age. Like, I don't remember that I told you that, or I don't remember what I did, or I can't remember your name. But then when you get the profound memory loss and personality change, that's something that comes with these Lewy body, especially, and Alzheimer's. People's personality completely shifts after a period of time because their brain, like those plaques, it literally changes your behavior. People become violent and aggressive when they may not have been their entire life. In addition to the cognitive piece, it also changes their personality. Yeah.
Can you teach regular psychology as well? Would that be correct?
Yeah, like intro, you mean like intro? Yeah. Mhm.
So why, you don't understand, why is that? Do old people keep telling the same stories? Why?
They don't remember.
I'm sure of that.
Sure, yeah.
Why?
It's just a matter of memory, right? Like it's something that's important to them.
My daughter knows all my story.
Yeah.
It's a really good story.
It's a good story. I tell the same story sometimes.
Sure, we visited once every 3 years.
My poor kids are gonna get the same stories one day over and over and over again. I hope that they just smile and just give me a piece of cake and let me ramble and I'll be happy. Yeah.
I don't know.
And what about the old stories uphill both ways, right? Like everything is, remembered didn't.
I really, I would say that's such a commonality.
It is.
And like, Dear Lord, don't all your family and friends know all your stories?
Yeah.
You know, but
But it's gonna be better this time. Did you have a?
Around you, like, talking to you, that, like, you want to bring stuff, and you like, yeah, and see that you're looking at.
And that's the hard part. So with Alzheimer's, hold on, we have like another minute, right? With Alzheimer's, what happens is there's kind of a range in the middle where it's the most difficult to deal with. In the beginning, it's small mishaps, so you can still function really well. At the very end, you need almost exclusive, like 100% care. There's a window in there where you are no longer aware of what's going on. And at that point, the suffering almost increases drastically. Because there's a part where like people are like, I'm no longer able to do all these things and I'm aware of that. That's when it's the most painful. And when you, in a way, have progressed past that, it almost gets better in the sense that that person's no longer aware of their memories. And so there's less pain. My dad would joke, he'd be like, I can read the same book 3 times and it's new every time. And he would make the best of it, right? And that happens toward the end when you're no longer aware of that loss. So there's kind of a window in there where it's much more painful for that person and the family. My dad would always look at my mom and be like, did I ever get married? And she'd be like, yes, to me, right? And his face would light up every time, like, oh, hi, right? Like I know, right? And it could have easily gone the other way of like, oh, you know, like it could have been like sad every time you look at her and be like, oh, hi, what are you doing? Right? It was sweet in a way. Like you have to try and find, you know, the best in it. Obviously, it was very sad all around. But like, you know, oftentimes when you pass that point of awareness, it's not as hard, right? But for years before that, he passed at 73. So young. What was that?
So he was doing that at like 69.
Yeah, to my mom, right? Hitting on my mom at 69, 70, right? Never too old. All right, so obviously going with this when I see you on a Wednesday, we'll also probably start the next chapter too.
If you covered this in the beginning of class when we were talking about the,
Yeah,
the
what?
5-page format, does everything have to be APA or is it just the reference and title?
So try and do everything in like, I'm not gonna
Like
grade
that.
it. Yeah, so double spaced.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be crazy about any of it because it's just that it's not really something that we're
Let's say
covering.
like for like our characters, like let's say we were to like link clips in, would it be all right to leave the clip in or did you want it like embedded so that
Oh, you're just
be able-
describing it.
Oh, just-
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, that would be fun to do it that way, but you're just